Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today you'll be a legendary speedster like Blur and Dragstrip, or a formidable adversary like Megatron or Optimus Prime, trying to be the first to speed across the planet's cities and deserts to be the first to reach the final checkpoint. Robo Rally Transformers is for 2 to 6 players, it takes 45 to 90 minutes to play, is for ages 14 and up, and it's published by Renegade Game Studios. Now today, we'll be doing a rule school. Well, I'll teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rule book yourself. So let's get started. In Robo Rally Transformers, you'll be taking on the role of legendary speedsters like Blur and Dragstrip, or formidable adversaries like Megatron and Optimus Prime. And each of those robots have cool miniatures that you'll be using on the board. And you'll be planning and activating different moves in order, like moving and turning and repeating, powering up and drifting left and right to try to move around the board. You'll be navigating around obstacles like laser turrets and oil spills, other robots, fire pits, and you can be trying to get your way to different checkpoints. If you're the first to get to all the checkpoints, you'll win. Certain aspects of the board are better when you're a bot, but others will be better when you're a vehicle or in alt mode. You'll be gaining Energon and using that to gain and install different upgrades like permanent, temporary use, or even personal ones that are specific to your bot. In addition to moving walkways, ramps, and pushing or shooting on the robots, you're trying to be the first one to get to all the checkpoints first to win. To set up, first we're going to have you set up the race course. Now we're going to set up the twin loop warm-up lap since this is probably going to be your first game, but in future games feel free to select any of the different courses that are in the book. After page 24 it also tells you the difficulty of the different courses. Now you'll need one main board called Speedia Qualifier, and it will say it in the upper left hand corner like this. The other one will be Starting Tile A. Now you'll place these boards next to each other like this in the middle of the table, and you want to make sure it's oriented the way that you see here, with Speedia Qualifier being in the upper left and the Starting Tile A being in the upper left as well. Now in the bottom right of the main board, if you look diagonally up to the left 2 spots, it's this last spot here, this grayish spot, you will place checkpoint number 1. Keep in mind you will need to sticker these before your first play. Towards the upper left of the main board, about 2 spaces just to the right of the Speedia Qualifier title, you'll put checkpoint number 2. And then you'll place the 5 Energon cubes on the spaces denoted on this board. Feel free to pause here as you place them. Next, each player is going to select a robot character to use in the game. Now in addition to that tile, you're also going to get the miniature of that robot. Now you're going to place that tile on the player board of the matching robot's color. Now this tile is double-sided. At this point it doesn't matter which side you place here. You're also going to take an Energon cube and place it on the level 5 of Energon, and you're also going to take this checkpoint marker that matches the color of your playboard and place it on the start spot. Next you're going to gain the 3 personal upgrades for your specific robot. Locate the upgrade deck that looks like this. Now this deck is split up into 3 types of cards: red upgrades, which are temporary, yellow upgrades, which are permanent, and blue background upgrades, which are personal upgrades. So from the personal upgrade cards, the one with the blue backs, you're looking for the 3 cards that have your robot's name, like in this case Optimus Prime. Each player is going to get their 3 personal upgrades with the blue background, and you'll place them face up to the left of your playmat. Now any blue personal upgrades that aren't being used because those characters aren't in the game, remove those cards from the box, so all you're left with now are the red temporary and yellow permanent upgrades. Shuffle these together, then deal each player 1 upgrade face down. Now this player can look at this card, but you'll want to keep it face down so that other players don't see it. Then you'll place that upgrade deck off to the side, but where everyone can reach it for later. Next you're going to locate the planning deck cards, and the back sides look like this. Now each robot has their own 22 card planning deck, and you'll know it's yours because the color on the cards will match the playmat and your robot. Now you'll shuffle that deck and you'll place it right on the draw pile of your playmat. Next you're going to locate the 40 damage cards. Now these cards have the same back as what your planning deck looked like, but on the front side of them they're going to have either an ongoing or an instant damage type. You'll shuffle all these cards together and place them face down in a deck off to the side next to the upgrade deck. Choose a starting player any way you see fit and give them the Cosmos Priority Token. Now starting with this player and going clockwise, You'll place your robot on any of the unoccupied green and white checkered flags on the starting tile, and your robot, the base has an arrow point and you want it pointing to the adjacent board. The object of the game is to be the first to get to all of the checkpoints. In this map, we have two checkpoints, one numbered 1 and another one numbered 2. You must go to the checkpoints in order. So first you're going to have to go to the number 1, and then you'll have to go to the number 2. So in this case, whoever gets to the number 2 in successive manner first is going to win the game. The game is played over multiple rounds, and each round goes through 4 phases: the upgrade phase, planning phase, activation phase, and end of round phase. And you'll keep doing this until the game ends. Now normally you start with the upgrade phase, but we're going to cover this later because this will make more sense once you understand the game better. So we're actually going to start showing you this in the planning phase. Now the planning phase is done simultaneously, which means all players are going to be doing this at the same time. The first thing you're going to do is draw cards from your own playing deck. So from your draw deck, you're going to draw up so that you have 9 cards in your hand. If when drawing up to 9, you've run out of cards in your draw deck, simply shuffle your discard pile, flip it over and set it as your draw pile, and continue drawing until you have the 9 cards. Next, you're going to choose 5 cards to place into your 5 numbered register spots. And these are going to help you do different things with your robot this activation phase. And these are going to be going in order, 1 through 5. So you're going to decide from the cards in your hand which ones to place in this specific order, 1 through 5, because that's the order they're going to happen in, but you'll place them face down. So this is how it might look after you've played all 5 cards. Now, optionally, you can flip your character to the other side. Right now it's in the robot form, and then it's in the alt form, which is basically being the vehicle. Now it doesn't cost you anything to do this in this phase. Later it will cost, we'll talk about that later. We'll also talk about why you would want to be on one side or the other as we start going through how the board interacts. So right now you might not know, but by the time you watch all the actions, you'll know which way you want to be. Now keep in mind you are going to have cards still in your hand that you have not played yet, and that is normal. So once everybody has done this, we're going to go to the activation phase. Now the way this works is the player with the priority token is going to go first, and then each player in clockwise order is also going to go. So first, I'm going to reveal the number 1 register card, and I'm going to take that action. I'll resolve this action, and then the next player to my left will resolve their number 1 register, and so on and so forth till all players have done that, and then I will resolve number 2. All players will do number 2, and we'll just keep going through this all the way through until all 5 registers have been done by all players in clockwise manner. So now let's talk about all the different actions that you can do with these cards. This one says move 1 straight ahead. And so simply, in this case, I'm just going to move 1 straight ahead just like that. Again, in succession in clockwise order, all the other players will do it too, so all the other players have moved, and now it's my turn to do my second card. And in this case, it is turn right. So in this case, I would just simply turn to the right, which is also known as clockwise. Now I'm going to teach you what the rest of these cards do, but I'm going to be placing the cards close to the camera just so it's easy to see, but keep in mind you don't really do this when you're playing, but I'm putting them near the board just for visual ease of use here. So in this case it says move 2, so I'm going to go 1, 2 for example. And keep in mind there's move cards that go from 1 to 3 spaces. Now we've already seen a turn right, but as you can imagine there are turn lefts, which is going to move you clockwise or 90 degrees to the left. If you use a move back card, it's going to move you directly backwards. Now I'm bringing you back to the board here for a reason. Let's say my next card was again. This does the last one that you have used. In this case we would move back again. There are also cards that say drift, like drift left or drift right, and when you drift you move directly. In this case drift right, I move 1 space directly to my right without changing my facing. The last card I haven't shown you yet is a power up. When you do that you gain 1 energon. We'll show you what you use this for a little bit later. Now that you know the basics of what these cards do, let's show you some of the things that might happen as you're using these cards and how you interact with other robots and with different board elements. First, let's talk about pushing. Let's say this red robot had a move 3. Well, there's a robot right in front of them, so to move one of the 3, they would need to push this robot like this. Now they're going to move a second one, and there's 2 robots, but each of them are going to get pushed like this for the second, and each is going to get pushed for the third movement. Now this is all known as one push event, and that will be important for abilities on other certain cards. Let's say this red robot had a move 3 as well. The first push moves it here. The second push would move it into this wall, so this robot does not move, which means the rest of this robot's movements are not used. Some of the elements on the board activate immediately, so we're going to go over all of those now. One of those things is the roads, and the roads look like this, and they have these arrows on them. However, these roads only activate if you're in alt mode because thematically you need to be a vehicle. Now, if you're on a road and you're in alt mode and you're facing in the direction of the arrows to start this movement, which we are, if you move, you get an additional movement. So if I had a move 1, I would actually move 1, but I would actually move an additional 1 because we're alt and we're in the direction of this arrow. Some of these roads have corners on them. Let's say I played a move 2 and we're in the direction of these arrows and we started on this spot. So move 2, because we're here, we're actually going to move 3. And again, this is always mandatory to get that extra movement. So I'm going to go 1, and when I move to the second one, you'll see this arrow going clockwise. Optionally, I can turn and continue my movement, but I don't have to. So I've moved my 2, but because I was on the road and I was in alt mode, I get an additional movement that's mandatory. I can either continue to move in the way I was going, or I could use this to turn and then continue my last movement like that. Keep in mind, if you're ever pushed onto a road corner, you do not have the option of using that. And if you started your turn on the corner with the arrow, in the direction of the arrow, you can use the road additional movement as normal. So if I played a move 1, because I'm facing in the direction of this arrow's facing, and I started here, I would actually get that additional movement. It's mandatory, so I would move 2. So I'd go 1, 2, and again, optionally I would be able to go there and move if I had more. Now another attribute that have immediate effects are buildings. These buildings look like this. These are doors, so you can kind of see ones that have doors. This is 2 buildings sort of together with a doorway in between them and so forth like this. Now you can only enter a building through a doorway and only if you're in bot mode. Now remember that during the planning phase, you can flip from one side to the other side for free, but in the activation phase, you may need to flip it to take advantage, and in that case, it costs 1 energon in order to do so. For example, you might want to be in alt mode to take advantage of a road, but then pay to flip to bot mode when running into a building or onto a moving walkway. So if I was in bot mode and I was moving 2, I could move into this door here for the second one. Now here you see this arrow here, this little curve. This means that when I get here, I can optionally turn. And if I had more movements, I could move again. So let's say I was here and I had move 3, I could go 1, 2, optionally turn and move again. And just remember, if this is where I started next turn and I turned into alt mode, I would not get this bonus because I was not facing in the direction of that arrow at the beginning of the turn. You can be pushed into buildings. Let's say I was in bot mode and this player moved 1, they would push me right into this building, just like that. However, if I was in alt mode, they would not be able to push me in, so their movement would stop right there. Now, if you move on to an oil slick and you end your movement there, you continue moving on that oil slick in that same direction until there's no longer an oil slick or you hit an obstacle. So in this case, if I had to move 1, I would end my movement, but because I'm an oil slick, I would move again. Now here is an energon cube. Now, if you pass over or land on the spot, you take it, you remove it from the board, but you move up 1 energon on your tracker. If you move on to a jump ramp and you're heading in the direction of the arrow, you then will move as many spaces as it took you to get to the jump ramp, that you'll be in air. Now, so if I'm 1 away and I go here, I move 1, and in this case, it jump ramps me right into the fire pit. But if I'm here, I go 2, 1, 2, I'm going to jump 2 spaces in air, ignoring anything I jump over, and land like that, for example, and then my movement is lost. For example, if I had moved 3, I would go 1, 2. In this case, it took us 2 to get there, 1, 2. Even though we moved 3, any additional movement is lost. You can be pushed over a jump ramp. Let's say this one has move 2. The first one pushes. The second one pushes this one in the fire pit. This is a 2, so it's going to jump 2, and this one stays in the fire pit. Now the last element on this board that will activate immediately is a fire pit. Now if you go into the fire pit, or if maybe you're pushed into one, you're going to take some damage. Now if you are the one to move yourself in the fire pit, your movement stops. And you immediately will lose your register 5 card to the discard pile. Sometimes you'll have more than 1 card with abilities. If so, all the cards from 5 go into your discard pile. When you take a damage, you will take the top card off the damage deck and look at it. Most of the damage are scrap damage. If it's a scrap damage, you're going to put this card directly in your hand. This clogs up your hand because remember you draw up to 9 cards at the beginning of the round in the planning phase, but this will count as one of those in your hand, so you'll get less useful cards. Also, you can never discard this card out of your hand at the end of the round as normal. So if they clog up your hand, how do you get rid of them if you can't discard them? You must plan it or repair it at a pit stop. So planning it, now by planning it, you'll be placing it in one of your registers, and when it's time to resolve that register, you'll flip it up, and you don't do anything, but some board effects might still happen to you. Now at the end of the round, you're going to take all your scrap cards in your registers and put it in the discard pile of the damage deck. And that's important because you want it to the discard of the damage deck because you don't want to put it in your own personal discard pile to come back in your hand later. We'll discuss the other way to repair damage a little later, but let's show you the other types of damage. Now so far we've just talked about scrap damage, which essentially clogs up your hand, but there's other types of damage you might get. Like instant, this is an energy leak. You'd lose one energon if you have any, and if you do, then place one energon cube in your space. You cannot pick it up without leaving and reinserting that space, then you discard that into the damage discard pile immediately. Sometimes there's some ongoing damage, like a flat tire. In alt mode, your move cards in registers 4 or 5 have -1. You must pay one energon to discard this. So in this case, this card would go next to your player board, and then once you pay one energon, you can discard this into this discard pile for the damage. In summary, during the activation phase, each player will activate their planning card for the current register in turn order and possibly interact with some of the elements on the board as I've already shown, like the road, oil, fire pits, jump ramps. But once all players have finished activating the current register's card, then there will be board activation, and these activate in a certain order. The first thing that activates are the moving walkways. Now everything here happens simultaneously and on all boards if you have more than one. Now let's say this, I'm facing up here and the walkway is showing to the left. It's going to convey one to the left, so I'm going to automatically move like this, staying in the same direction. Now more about walkways are you can only move onto this if you're in bot mode, not alt mode. However, if you're in alt mode and you get pushed, you do go on to the walkway. And in this case, when it conveys, it still will convey me even though I'm in alt mode because I was pushed onto it. If you're being conveyed in a specific direction and the moving walkway ends and there's a robot there, you do not push it. You stay where you're at. Now after the moving walkways, you'd activate any fire pits. If anyone is still in a fire pit, they take another damage. Next, the laser turrets are going to activate. Here we see two of them, one shooting in this direction and one shooting in this direction. Now, if there's a robot there, they're going to get hit by the laser turret and they're going to take 1 damage per laser that's hitting them. In this case, this laser's hitting them, and so is this one, so they'll actually take 2 damage. However, if this robot was here, this laser hits this robot and it doesn't go any further, this robot takes 1 damage, and this laser hits this robot, this one takes 1 damage, and it blocks a laser from going past them. Now let's talk about those pit stops. And remember, the pit stop is a way to repair damage. So let's say we have sort of ended our movement in the pit stop. We've gone through all of the board element activations. And after the laser turrets, then you're going to activate this pit stop. And here you're going to take 2 actions from the following choices, which can be repeated. You can gain an energon or discard 1 damage. So again, you could spend both actions to gain 2 energons. Or you could gain 1 energon and discard a damage, or you could do nothing here and discard 2 damage. Now remember, discarding damage comes from your hand and goes into the damage discard pile, not your own. Now remember, during the activation phase, each player is going to activate their planning card. They might interact with things like oil and the roads and things like that. But then, once all players have done that, then the board is going to activate. Now once all the board activation is over, you're then going to activate your robot weapons. Your robot is going to fire its weapon. It doesn't need anything special or a card to do so. It just will do it unless this turn you had scrap damage, then it won't shoot. Now if you're in alt mode, meaning the vehicle, it'll shoot in a straight direction all the way until it hits a robot or until it hits something like an obstacle. In this case, it would shoot here. If you're in bot mode or robot mode, it can shoot straight or to the left or to the right. In this case, it's going to shoot over here. It shoots over the fire pit. It would normally hit this person, this robot, but because there's a wall, it's an obstacle, it stops there. So in this case, if I was a bot, I'd know this would get stopped, so I would shoot straight to that robot. When you get hit with damage, you take damage as I showed you earlier, taking a card and doing its respective thing depending on what that card is. Now shooting around the ramps, if there's nobody on the ramp, it obstructs shooting. So I could not shoot over the ramp and hit this robot. However, if there is a robot on the ramp, this robot can now be shot by them, and this robot could also shoot this one. Robots cannot shoot into a building, so this one could not shoot this one, but robots within the same building can be shot. So this one could shoot this one could shoot this one. Also, if you're in a building and there's a door there, you could shoot outside of it. So if this one was in bot mode, which means it could shoot straight, left, or right, it could shoot left out this door and hit this one if it wanted to. These are grandstands and they're obstacles, so you cannot move into them or through them, and you cannot shoot through them either. If you ever go off the board for any reason, including when actually being pushed, first you gain 2 damage, as talked about before, and then you're going to discard your next register. In this turn, you won't do any moves, but at the end of this register's turn, meaning after the checkpoint resolution of that phase, you would move back into that space and then turn in any direction. But if it's occupied like this, you would move into the next closest unoccupied legal placement. In this case, if you were a bot, it would be here because this is a moving walkway and they could move here. You could not move here because this is sort of an obstacle. You can't move on here. So if they weren't a bot and they were an alt, this would be the next closest. And when you do move to that next closest legal space, you face in any direction you like. After the robots fire weapons, you do a checkpoint resolution, meaning if at this point your robot is standing on a checkpoint, like in this case, it's checkpoint number 1. You would move your checkpoint to there. Now remember, you have to do these in order. So if I was standing on checkpoint number 2 and I hadn't yet gone to number 1, nothing happens. But if I go to number 1, I go here. And then in this case, if I've done number 1 and I get to number 2 in this step, I would win the game. Now remember, during the activation phase, you're activating a specific register. Everyone's doing it clockwise, possibly interacting with immediate actions on the board, then having different board elements activate, then weapons, and then possibly checkpoint. And then you're going to go to the second card, and third, fourth, and fifth. After that, you're going to then do a little bit of cleanup. Number 1, if you're holding this first player priority token, you pass it to the player to your left. Then, if you have any damage here, it's going to go into the damage discard pile, and the rest of these are going to go in your discard pile. Also, you'll discard any planning cards that are still in your hand, but remember, if you have damage in your hand, you do not discard that. Then you're going to move back to the first phase of the round, which is the upgrade phase. If you remember, we skipped this. We did planning phase, activation phase, end of round, and now we're going to go and show you what the upgrade phase is. The upgrade phase is done simultaneously, and during this phase, you can perform any or all of the following actions only once in any order that you choose. You can spend 1 energon to draw 1 card off the upgrade deck. Now you'll look at that card, then you place it face down in your uninstalled upgrade section of your board, which is to the left. And there's no limit as to how many uninstalled upgrades you can have. You can install 1 upgrade. And if it is a permanent upgrade, like this, the yellow backs would say permanent, you put it in the installed upgrade section above your player board. You must spend the amount of energon to do this. In this case, it would cost 2 energon to place this out. And I have a permanent ability that says, when you end your movement adjacent to the front striped side of a grandstand, gain 1 energon. Another type of upgrade that you can install, a permanent one, is your personal one. So again, you'd spend that much energon, and now you have your permanent personal upgrade installed. Also keep in mind that some personal upgrades, like this blasted one for Optimus Prime, allows you to discard cards. For example, it says, if adjacent, you may discard any move card to also push them 1 space in the direction that you shot them. Now, when you discard cards, they come from your hand, they don't come from your register. At most, you can have 4 permanent upgrades installed. One thing you can do is uninstall an upgrade. So in this case, if it is a permanent one, a non-personal one, you would place this in the discard pile of upgrades. If you uninstall one of your personal ones, it just goes to the side of your board because you can reinstall that later. You can also install a temporary upgrade. Place this to the right of your board. That will make it different from the uninstalled ones on the left of your board. These are temporary, which means they will stay here until you activate them, but once they're activated, they will go into the upgrade discard pile. You still have to pay the amount of energon to put these out. And remember, you can only install any 1 upgrade during this phase, or uninstall 1 upgrade, or draw 1 new upgrade. That's it. So in summary, remember, you're going through 4 phases: the upgrade phase, the planning phase, the activation phase, which remember, at the end, towards the end of the activation phase, you'll do the checkpoint resolution. If someone has finished the last checkpoint, the game ends and they win. Otherwise, you go to end of round and continue doing this. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Robo Rally Transformers faster than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, there's a link in the description of this video below me. That's the best place to ask them because I'll be notified, but so will Renegade Game Studios.